Welcome to the Week 8 wrap-up here. Blood, Sweat, and Beers.
No one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the old way.
How much emphasis, how much focus do you put on the point projections when you're setting your lineup each week? I know we all have certain players that are really the set it and forget it type, and we just roll with that. But if you've got a decision to make, one quarterback over another, or who to put in your flex spot, how much focus do you give to that point projection when you're making that decision? I know that there are a lot of numbers that are crunched, past performance, the team that they're going against, yada, yada. But I think that the human element comes out of that, and we start to, or they fail to really take a look at the players are people, they're human. And so sometimes they may be in a slump, but we know that over the course of their career, they don't stay in a slump for very long. Or they've been playing well, and we know that there's a return to the mean. They're not going to be playing that well for very long. The reason I ask is twofold. One, because 8 of our 10 teams left at least one player that scored at least 20 points on their bench this past weekend that they could have put in. The only two that didn't, Ertz and Don Chris. Now, in Don's case, it wouldn't have made any difference at all, unfortunately for him. And I guess in Ertz and Alex Billy's case, it really didn't make a difference because he already won. They had almost the same score, very, very similar score. But for the rest of us, there may have been change in the outcome depending on who we had played. And I know that's always the case, but I know that I probably rely a little too heavily on the point projection to set my lineup if I haven't had the time during the week to do any more research than that. And so it has come back to bite me several times. The other reason I ask is because I wonder just how accurate these point projections are. I'm sure if we looked at a large enough case study, we would find that it's probably more accurate than it isn't. But I have a player where the point projections have been wildly inaccurate. Davante Adams. I won't even get into how frustrating Monday night was. I think I've just gotten into it. But as I look at the point projections through the first 8 games of the season, the first 2 months of the season, he has met his point projection twice. In week 2, he came within 1/10 of a point of it. We'll call that meeting it. And then the next week, when he exploded 13 catches over 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, and doubled his point projection. That means 6 times he's not even really come close to the projection. And yet week over week over week, he was still projected high. They still expected him to show up, or I guess he was always there. They somehow expected Garoppolo to become a real live quarterback. Won't get into Monday night. So as I look back, he's been under 13 points 5 times in 8 weeks. And yet up until this week, he was still being projected at 17, 18, 20 points, 22 points a game. And it just wasn't there. Finally, in week 9, they've knocked him down to a more reasonable projection that I still wonder if he'll make, given who's throwing the ball over his head every time he looks. Anyway, just curious what you think, how much focus you give to those point projections that we see. Let's take a quick look at the scoreboard from this past week. All right, starting at the top as I see it, Kamish dropping a 4th straight to Poncho. McCaffrey, Hawkinson doing what they do. Jacobs even gets in a little bit on the action, but in the end, it was just not enough to compete with Joe Burr and that pretty impressive rookie Gibbs running all over everybody, at least for the past couple weeks. So streaks there. Poncho secures or maintains his number 2 spot, where Kamish unfortunately lost his number 2 spot. We'll look at the standings here in just a bit. Gloop back to doing what he does after just 125 points the last 2 weeks. Back scoring some points, showing us what it looks like to stay on top. He maintains number 1 in the West. And light rail, continuing his struggles, drops to number 3 in the East. Alex Billy finally doing something right. While he's still 4th in the West, he did his job, taking Keith out, keeping him in the basement over there in the East. So nice job there. Appreciate this was the week to show up for sure. Joe stops his streak while still in the basement in the West. Gave himself an impressive win over Jersey Birds. Sad that Jersey Birds scores the most points in a defeat. Unfortunately, this week, in fact, Jersey Birds would have beat 7 of the teams, the other teams around the league, if he had played them. Unfortunately, he played the guy who scored the 2nd most, and he only scored the 3rd most. So A.J. Brown continuing to just light it up, gives Jersey Birds some promise going forward, but hanging out there a couple games back. Not sure what happened here with Aaron. I just don't know. I don't even know what to say. 86 points. That was rough. Team had a rough go of it. Tyreek doing what Tyreek does, and nobody else doing much to help the cause. Puzzles asserts himself, stamps his number 1 spot there in the East. He is now the team to beat over there, and now he is gunning for, or looking towards, that first round bye, him and Gloop. Last week, I was calling for a little bit of a muddling at the top of our divisions. I was hoping to make it murky. So there'd be some ties for first place, maybe some ties for second place, that we could try to get a couple of teams right there at the top, making each week that much more interesting. And it worked out exactly the opposite. As we see it today, as we look at the standings quickly, we'll see that it is nice and neat and organized. We have a clear number 1 in both divisions. We have a clear number 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys made it really boring. I don't know if we've ever had a situation like this before. I'm not going to spend the time to go back and fact check that, but we have a clear order in each of those divisions, so everybody knows what they need to do. Just a quick shout out to our 2 last place teams. You're now both in double-digit percentages to make the playoffs at 13 for Keith and 19 for Joe, respectively there. However, we know that we're still gunning for Keith, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to change that name come next season. Maybe that's what we can start. That's our new chant. That's our new motto. Change the name. No, it doesn't have it. That's okay. We'll see what happens. Look forward next week to an on-location recap for Week 9. Otherwise, enjoy your weekend.